we will get right back to our content, but I wanted to thank you for being such an amazing band director, that you're taking your time and listening to a band director podcast. There's many options out there, and I appreciate you very much taking in this content. I hope that you understand that your students are very lucky to have you as their band director, that you're continuing to grow, and that they are going to benefit from your improved skills as a band director. You can share this episode with any band director friends or other music education friends who can learn from this content, because good pedagogy is good pedagogy. And if you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com, and you'll be able to sign up on our Patreon platform to give at least $5 or $3 a month. And it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode. Welcome back to the Growing Band Director Podcast. This is episode number 215. I'm here with composer and arranger Chris Sharp. Chris, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Thanks for being here. We're going to start. I think a lot of people know your name as a writer, and we're going to be listening to, oh my, I got it here. Six of your tunes within the concert band and jazz band realm, all the way from grade 2 up through grade 4. So hopefully people enjoy those. But we're going to start with sort of some rapid fire questions. So give us some, your thoughts on these topics. First question. How did you start composing, and do you have any advice for band directors who might want to start composing?
Well, I actually started writing arrangements when I was in high school. I had a private instructor. Her name was Jean Williams, and she played in the Eastman Wind Ensemble in the 60s with Frederick Fennell. And one day when I was taking a lesson from her, I noticed on her piano she had been writing an arrangement. And so that kind of intrigued me. I thought, well, maybe I could give that a shot. And I kind of had curiosity about that when I was just, playing through a band piece. I'd look up in the corner at the name and think, okay, so who's this guy? Can I do this? Maybe. And so I kind of got the bug to start writing arrangements. And I started about my junior year of high school. And I remember my first arrangement was for like a brass quintet, and I totally botched the French horn transposition. So it was a disaster. And that's typical. I teach arrangers at the college where I teach now, University of Lynchburg. We have an arranging class, and typically, something goes wrong on the first arrangement or two arrangements. And so I said, don't worry about it. You're not stupid. It's par for the course. You're going to
Mhm.
screw up. And that's how you learn. And so I wrote arrangements into college, and I didn't really get into composing until I got a contract with FJH Music. And I had composed a piece when I was a high school band director. And that was one of the reasons I bailed out of Walt Disney World and took a band director job, is because I wanted to get into the writing business.
Mhm.
And I knew that I'd written hundreds of arrangements for Walt Disney World, but it was all copyright protected stuff. So I really couldn't touch it as far as trying to put it out on the market. And so when I took the high school band director job, I kind of used it as a laboratory. I had, living real live guinea pigs that I could throw stuff out and see if it would work or not. And it was definitely an adjustment having to dial back my arranging, the difficulty from writing for professionals to writing for high school kids and middle school kids, which, if you're getting into publishing, that's the meat of the market. You're not going to make much money publishing really blazing difficult charts because the market is so limited. You're only going to be, you might be able to sell some to professionals and to better colleges and maybe the occasional high school program that's like way beyond their years. But if you're going to write, you're going to be better off, certainly, as far as getting the most bang for your buck if you write grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and maybe into grade 4. Uh, if you're writing grade 5 and grade 6 concert music, it's going to be very difficult to get anyone to pay attention to that,
Mhm.
because if they can play that kind of stuff, they're going to be playing the Hindemith Symphony and West Point Symphony and Giannini and all those things that every band director wants to play, but their bands are not quite good enough for that. So, you know, I know that, if any band is that good, they're going to be playing Maslanka or uh, Mackie or one of those pieces that everybody wants to play. So if you want to get into writing, you're a whole lot better off sticking to the crossover market, which is the biggest market. I'm talking about charts that a decent to good middle school band could play, but also high schools with big programs, they'll have two and three bands, and they need stuff for those second and third bands to play. So grade two, grade three, grade four, that's the meat of that market.
Okay, so what do you think are some features of your music, sort of in general, which is why band directors should pay attention to that? I mean,
Well,
every piece is different, right? So you can't just right. So like,
yeah,
where's it coming from?
well, I try not to get into formulaic music because there are people that do that, and there are people that do that very successfully. But I tend to try to treat every piece as its own piece and not try to force it into some kind of preconceived mold. Um, but as far as what I think makes my pieces attractive in general is because I have a certain commercial sensibility that I developed as an arranger for Disney. There were certain things that you had to stay within as far as if you're writing for, people that are in an amusement park. Like, you can't really write ballads because that's boring and they're going to walk away and find a hot dog somewhere. So you have to keep things pretty much on the uppity side, brighter and happy music, and you're not going to write anything really slow tempo or drudgery or anything super dark, um, unless it calls for that. I remember I was called to write for there was this kind of high-powered supersonic circus that was going on at Epcot for a little bit, and they gave me this arrangement of it was a recording. I don't remember who did the recording of it, Night on Bald Mountain, and that was about the darkest thing that I ever wrote. And it was kind of a poppy, funk rock kind of arrangement of that. But I think just having to produce arrangements that keep people's attention. If you're out there playing on the street in a band and you get people walk up and stop to see your band, you don't want them staying there for 30 seconds and walking away. You want to try to keep them engaged for as long as you can. And I think that aesthetic certainly translates well to the market where you're trying to keep 13-year-olds engaged. If you can write stuff that is entertaining to them as well as hopefully pedagogically sound, then you've struck the market. They will beat a path to your door if you can write stuff that's not just grade two or grade three, but is actually good music on its own merits.
And as someone who lives with a 13-year-old, I second that comment. I appreciate that. Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast with a roster of imaginative composers, including composers who have been featured on this podcast, such as Carol Britton Chambers, Laura Estes, and Tyler Arcari. Excelsior Music Publishing provides new music for concert band, jazz ensemble, solo and ensemble, as well as books and resources for all levels and occasions, including a large and festive selection of music for your fall, holiday, and Christmas concerts. Find your perfect next piece at excelsiamusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com. We're going to talk about your company here in a second, but before we do, what other publishing companies are you published with outside of your company?
Well, I'm with a number of them. I started with Ware's Music House doing ensemble stuff, and then I was picked up by Jalen Matrix Publishing because Alan Gray was working for the Disney Magic Music Days, and he recruited me into his stable there. And I did a few charts for them, and then I was at the Midwest Clinic in the early 2000s. I was a band director. I was a high school band director back then. And I had assembled a package and I started shopping it around. And, I was shown the door by some of the big companies like Hal Leonard and Carl Fisher. They were like, oh, thanks, but no thanks. But then a friend of mine who was a writer, Quincy Hilliard, he directed me to FJH, Frank Hackinson, who was the president at the time, which is FJH, that's his initials. And he said that Frank was looking for new writers. And so I went there and pitched my package with them, which included some of the Disney charts that I'd done and the original that I'd done. And lo and behold, I got called a couple months later and they brought me on. So I worked with FJH for about 12 years, 14 years, I think, before I decided that I'd established enough name recognition to go out on my own. So
I love that.
along the way, I picked up some writing for some of the like horror publishers. I have a couple of things with oh, the name escapes me now. Hope Publishing, I think I have one chart with them. And Lawrence, yeah, Lawrence is one of the others. So, here and there. And I also have about a handful of charts with Alfred, some concert band and some jazz ensemble.
I also love talking to people who can write for both idioms because they're very different. And somebody who can write for both, I have a big appreciation for. My ears perked up a little bit when you said Quincy Hilliard. For people who know that name and maybe haven't heard it, I did interview Quincy a few months ago on episode number 186. If they want to go back and hear directly from Quincy, what a nice man.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
And
Um,
I met him and he was in graduate school when I was an undergraduate at the University of Florida. And um, I wasn't good enough to make the top jazz band the first couple of years because I just, I couldn't sight read my way out of a wet paper bag. And so Quincy was he was a graduate assistant, and so I was in his jazz band, and that's how I first met him.
Small
Uh,
world.
Bob Sheldon was also a graduate student at that point, and working on establishing his name. So one thing you're going to find out is that us people that have been in the business for a while, we pretty much know everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I love that. I want to thank Austin Custom Brass for being a sponsor of today's podcast. Trent Austin started this wonderful shop back in the Boston area many years ago and has moved to Kansas City. Check out their unique line of doublers instruments that are perfect for students, band programs, and players of all ages. The Austin Custom Brass Doublers Flugelhorn is their most popular selling instrument, available in 5 different beautiful finishes. These flugelhorns come with a case in Austin Custom Brass's Fab 5 mouthpiece. The Doublers Flugelhorn offers a quality sound, playability, and affordability. Get one for yourself or your whole trumpet section today. Call Austin Custom Brass at 816-410-0826. They are located in Kansas City, Missouri, but they ship all over the country and they're wonderful humans and great people to hang with. Austin Custom Brass works with band programs from all over the country. They can provide a bid to you today, work within your school's budget, and accept POs. Call their team today at 816-410-0826 or email at info@austincustombrass.com. Tell us a little bit about your company, C Sharp Music.
well, we started in 2015. And the first product that we published was a thing called the tonality shifting warm-ups, which has been kind of a popular thing among the band directors, kind of a word of mouth thing. And we've probably sold more copies of that than anything. In fact, not too long after the first version of it, which is for advanced bands, we came out with a level called for developing bands, and it's more at a middle school level. It only covers up to like 4 flats and 2 sharps, I believe. Whereas the original tonality shifting warm up is in 2 parts. There's an F1 and a B flat one, and between the two, all 12 keys are covered. So that's more of a product for college bands or very good high school bands.
Yep. Michelle Fernandez Music is the new source for culturally authentic and rhythmically intriguing music in both the symphonic and jazz ensemble categories, with works available for all ages from middle school to collegiate and beyond. Michelle's unique writing style resulted from decades of personal experience in studying, teaching, and composing music in a wide variety of multicultural styles and genres. All of Michelle's works include percussion parts that are completely notated, and that also include clear and concise performance instructions on all student parts, as well as a score to increase student understanding and independence. Visit michelle-fernandez.com. That's www.michelle with one L Fernandez.com. Great. People should check that out. Just again, a couple more questions. A couple of charts that come off the top of your head in either style that are sort of your most popular ones.
Um, well, our Christmas music seems to do the best. Um, we have a thing called Christmas in a Nutshell that we released about maybe 4 years ago, and it's kind of like instant concert for Christmas music, and it's Christmas tunes that are interspersed between excerpts from the Nutcracker Suite. And I know that a lot of concert band directors, the more serious ones, they just, they want to do their Christmas tune and get out of the way so they can get on to the real music. And so I tried to put something together that's about 3 minutes long that hit, 25 pieces of music, and they could say, okay, been there, done that, we're done. Now I can play, Prelude, Siciliano, and Rondo.
Oh, what a great piece that is.
Uh-huh.
Um, cool. I did want to mention one of your charts we're not talking about today that I really like, and I'm all about the serious music, but Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. I know some people don't like that tune altogether, but I'm just telling you from an educational standpoint, I know it's a grade two. It features the trombones and it's in cut time. I mean, those are two great things to have in a piece. So I really like that chart. As silly as that is.
Well,
Um,
I remember getting the assignment for that. I'm thinking, oh, you got to be kidding me.
yeah, yeah, I love it. I think it's
But
great. I mean, it's not our
I
most
did
serious piece, but
well. I did the best chart on it that I could imagine doing.
yeah,
They say, polishing a turd, and
polishing it.
ended up being a pretty consistent seller.
Is
So
is
I
there
can't
any
complain.
is there anything new that you have coming out or that maybe is on the horizon that you're really excited about?
Well, the biggest seller that we've had in this current catalog is a thing. It's a winter tune, but it's secular. It's not Christmas tunes, and it's called A Frosty Frolic.
Hmm.
And we've sold a number of those already. And it's basically a poor man's sleigh ride at the grade two level. And that was another case where it's like, I want to write a good piece of music, but I want it to be accessible to the widest range of bands
Yeah,
possible. So I like to think, that community bands are picking it up as well as high school bands and of course middle school bands, because that's probably the primary market for that. And we even have a follow-up piece coming up in our next catalog, which is the Halloween version, and it's called A Scary Scherzo. So I think Frosty Frolic is one of the ones that you have on your docket here. So you guys
yeah,
will be able to hear that one.
yeah. I think we'll let's just jump to that right away. It's a March in 2/4. It's an F in B flat, and there's so much in there. Yeah, so let's check it out. Here's a Frosty Frolic. Okay, so regarding commissions, I'm sure you've done a bunch of commissions and things. If people are looking to do a commission with you, I assume that they can reach out to you. Do you have any advice for people, whether they're reaching out to you or to another composer, about things they can do to make the whole commission process go smoothly?
Well, the hardest thing is just to have somebody call you up and say, we want to commission a piece. And then you ask them, okay, what are we talking about here? Do you have like a theme and if they give you like zero input, then you got to come up with something. That's the hard thing. I much prefer it for them to call me up. I just got a commission recently from a local band that's going to be performing at a minorities band directors convention in Atlanta next spring. And he said, we'd like you to do a piece based on the legend of John Henry, the railroad guy. And
Hmm.
so I thought, oh, this is great. I can throw in railroad sounds and, throw in a a hammer beating on a brake drum and just using all kinds of railroad sounds. So that that immediately got the creative juices flowing, and I'm probably about three-quarters of the way through that piece already.
Mm.
So I always ask, is there somebody that you're trying to honor here? And if so, did they have a favorite kind of music or a favorite piece of music? I did a piece a couple of years ago for a band in Iowa that was a community band, and their director was retiring. And his favorite thing to say was they always played in this park that I guess was very verdant and spring-like. And he said he would always use the term "a thousand shades of green." So that's what I called the piece.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, what are all the tunes that I know of that use the word green? And so it was like now the green blade riseth, and in England's green and pleasant land. And so these were all tunes that I could throw in there that tied the green theme together. And
Mm.
so that one was a little easier to put together just because of that bit of input.
That's great. I've talked to a lot of directors who've done commissions, and some of them even talk about, like they basically let their kids come up with ideas and then they vote on the things. And one of my good friends is Andy Boysen, and he says he's got a great piece that's grade 3 with Chose, I believe it is, called Metamorphosis, and it's all about the life stages of a butterfly, right? And but it was literally like between that and some other random thing, and the middle school band voted on whatever it was, and because it was about the commission, there wasn't anything set yet, but that's a great chance to involve your students as a
Mhm.
composer here is saying, give me some direction to go on.
Yeah. Well, I've heard instances where a composer will collaborate with the actual students in the group. And, he'll come up with a theme and then throw it out there and then have the students, create variations on the theme or, play it in a certain way. And it definitely suggests things to the composer. So that's a good way to get input. The hardest thing is just to come, like I said before, is just to come up with ideas out of a vacuum because there's so many possibilities that just trying to narrow it down to something that's going to work and is going to be appropriate for the group can be a real challenge.
I've also heard other people who answered the same question who are composers, and they say the director needs to be honest about what the band can actually do. Where are the strengths? Where are the weaknesses? Like the composer, if as a composer you write this trombone solo and your trombone section is terrible, like they need to know this, so
Yeah.
it's a good piece of music for the students.
Well, that's the question I ask for my marching band guys. They'll call up and I'll say, "Okay, where are the stars this year?" Oh, I got a great alto sax player. I know I got a great mellophone soloist. All right, oh, my clarinets are weak, and that kind of thing. And that's, I'm sure you've had the same experience with your writer,
Mm-hmm.
Terry White, and he probably asked you the same questions. Okay, where are your studs? Where are your weaknesses?
Yeah.
You got a good percussion section this year, or whatever.
Yeah.
And
It's
also
key.
that process has evolved considerably since I started doing it. Whereas before, the pit was just kind of there to provide some extra sound effects. Now it's an integral element, and its development has opened up literature that you couldn't possibly have done before
Mm-hmm.
with people marching around on the field with wind instruments because there are some serious limitations there, particularly if you've got a young group and you got kids that have never marched and played at the same time. So yeah, I'm sure that you are painfully aware of some of the limitations. And some years you're just like, oh, now what am I gonna do?
It's
So
a it the front ensemble can add an entirely new layer. In fact, we hear our horn arrangement, and then the first time I hear it with front ensemble, it's like an entirely new piece of
oh
music.
yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
and I'll say this, Terry doesn't actually write our front ensemble. I do know someone really well who's a fantastic front ensemble arranger. If anybody's looking for a writer, just hit me up. I'll send you to his way. He's
Okay.
fantastic. I
Will
couldn't ask for
do.
anything more. Okay, so let's get into some more of your pieces. Next piece we're going to listen to is another grade 2. I think you have it as a 2.5. This is a ballad in B flat and E flat called Hymn to the Heartland. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, Hymn to the Heartland. It's basically a reaction to the James Barnes piece, Yorkshire Ballad. which everybody knows that piece. And so I thought I want to do like the American version of that. And so I used Copeland references and just tried to make it sound like something that was kind of him-like and kind of something, that suggested, the heartland of America. And there wasn't any specific impetus to do that other than that I wanted to do a ballad piece. I wanted to be successful writing a ballad piece to
Yeah.
add to the standard repertoire.
And that's great. We're going to hear it in a second. I just want to say to people who are listening, if you're new to the show, we typically, if we have a wide range of simpler and then more complex music, we usually start with the simpler music and we work through. So if this is our second grade too, but there are some grade threes and some grade fours coming as well. But again, the grade level is not important. It's how the piece fits your band, right? You could be a fantastic group playing a grade two. And I think as long as it's good music, it's just fantastic. Yeah. All right. So let's check it out. Here's Hymn to the Heartland. So off air, Chris, we were talking a little bit about younger band music specifically, right? So what's some advice you have for some composers and band directors as they're choosing music that is of the less experienced variety?
Well, as I was saying, I think the key to success at that level is not to try to write something that fits the grade level. Just write a good piece of music. And if it happens to fit the grade level, great. If it doesn't, don't try to force it into the grade level. Just let it go. If you start out writing a grade two and you end up writing a grade three, hey, as long as it's a good grade three, then just roll with it. But one of the hardest things to write is grade one music because every time you come up with a good idea, you find yourself bumping up against the limitations, range limitations or rhythmic limitations. You can't overwhelm the band that you're trying to write for because then you haven't been successful writing the piece that you set out to write.
Well, one of the things I know as somebody who is in the public schools every single day currently, I know that one thing kids don't know very well is history. They don't know history of anything. So it's just sort of a segue into our next piece. The next piece we're going to do of yours is An American Spectacular, um, a musical history of the United States. And I love this medley. We're going to listen to probably about half of it, I think. But I wanted to just list off the tunes that are in here because it's like, if nothing else, these students are learning tunes in the history of this country. God Save the Queen. Of course, I say that, but that's from another country. But of course, it's America. Um, the Girl I Left Behind Me, Chester, which is from the Revolutionary War, right? Hail Columbia, Columbia, Gem of the Ocean, Shenandoah, When Johnny Comes Marching Home, The Battle Cry of Freedom, Over There, Caissons, America's Beautiful. I mean, just to have an arrangement that uses all these pieces is just awesome. In addition to what I've said, can you tell us a little bit more about this piece?
Well, one of the things I do before I set out to write a piece is I go to Pepper and find out what kind of pieces are similar to it. And then I try consciously not to just recreate something that's there already. Because people are looking for something that fills a gap. And one of the things that I try to do every year is provide literature that's going to be also appropriate for community bands. Because having directed a community band, I've directed actually several community bands, one of them full time. I realized that there is a certain aesthetic that will draw the community band to your music. But also, you're trying to cover as many markets as possible because for us, it takes a ton of my time to get a piece ready to go to print, and a ton of effort, and also the expense of printing and all that stuff, and getting a demo recording made. So we're definitely trying to maximize the bang for our buck every time we put out a piece. And so if I can get it to address more than just one market, then that's a bonus. But what I noticed in looking around at the patriotic medleys is that most of them would only include, maybe two or three tunes, some of them even less than that. And I thought, what a great idea would be to actually chart the musical path of the development of the United States. And so that's what I tried to do with this piece.
So this is, an American history lesson along with the piece, and you can weave
Mhm.
that 1,000 different ways with other cross-curricular things, or just on your own with the band. And it's just, I love it when students are forced to study history through our music. And I also mentioned here, obviously, this is patriotic, so you could do this around Memorial Day, or if you have a concert that's around Veterans Day. I mean, it took me 20 years as a teacher to go, wait, we have a November concert. Why am I not doing something Veterans Day? Like I get there, I'm like, oh, we should have a Veterans Day piece. But then next year I'd program for the thing and I wouldn't remember that it's around Veterans Day. So this is a great November concert piece too.
Well, of course, the community bands are also playing through the summer, so they need
Correct.
4th of July literature.
Yeah.
But I'm aware, as from being a former public school teacher, that the curricular stuff is a big deal. And if you can put something together with the English department, or if you've got like a department where they're making films, if you can get some kind of involvement that way, that's always a plus, and always things that administrators look for. And even we even do that at the college where I'm teaching now. Just about every concert that we give, the director will put together a video that accompanies all the pieces for the entire concert. So the audience is not engaged at just a listening level, but they're also visually engaged as well. And they're always packed. Every concert we give is a full house.
And if people are hearing that for the first time, I'm just going to give a couple experiences I've done with that. It's worth the time. Sometimes I've had students who can make the movie, like, okay, you're doing Pirates of the Caribbean, and like, okay, so make a custom film on iMovie that like goes with the music from that arrangement or whatever. And two that I've done, sometimes you have to think outside the box. Once was we were doing like a Carol of the Bells, I forget which arrangement it was, and we have like our downtown lights in our town are great. So it was like this video like somebody had done of our town lights in the middle of the winter, and it was like a really cool backdrop to that. And then we were doing Patapan, which is like this French tune, and I found this aerial video of like this drone going over France. And it was like I didn't want anything that was too specific to the music because we weren't trying to line it up with like hit points and all that, but it was just really more of a background to it. And I've every time I've taken the time to do it or had kids do it, it's completely been worth it.
Ah, well, I have a piece you need to check out then. It's
Okay, what
called
is it?
Christmas Lights. It's an FJH composition. It's called Christmas Lights, and it's a Christmas medley in the style of Trans-Siberian Orchestra. There's an electric guitar part. And that's the aesthetic I was trying to capture there. And it's been pretty popular. I've
Cool.
sold quite a numbers of those.
What a great segue on our part. We just mentioned a piece we're not going to listen to, and we haven't listened yet to the one we talked about. So let's go back. Let's listen again. This is about half of the piece on American Spectacular. Okay, so our next piece is sort of a crossover because we have a couple jazz ensemble pieces, but this piece is still written for the wind band, but it's in a jazz band style on It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year. And I love it because it's just the straight ahead tune. You've done some great stuff with it, but it's like of the grade four. I've known it for, is it 2010 it came out? Maybe somewhere in that
It's
area.
been a while.
Yeah, but I've always loved it. But the thing is, for our holiday concert, I take our two bands, and in 3 weeks, we just combine them and we just do stuff that's like in the middle. So it's always been a little hard for our freshman band. So I've never done it, but I keep waiting for the year that I'm going to do like our bands separate, and then we're gonna do it. So if people are looking for like a big band holiday tune, this is right on the top of my list. Would you call this a grade four,
Um,
3.5?
I'm not sure what it's listed as.
Okay.
I think I might have called it a 3.5.
Yeah.
It can be kind of tough for kids to put together if they're not really used to playing with a rhythm section.
Yeah.
But this piece came about as an FJH assignment where I think they had two or three properties that they had purchased, and this was one of them, and I knew the chart. So I volunteered to take that one because I love the Andy Williams version,
Hmm.
and it's done quite well over the years. So, and I just it's a very happy piece, and I think community bands in particular really like it.
Yeah, and you need a drummer. You need a drum set
Yeah,
player.
right.
And for a lot of kids in your band, maybe they've never played in jazz band before. So some of the concepts in here, you really have to, are not as obvious as we think because maybe they've just lived in that concert band world.
Well, chances are you probably have a bass player in your concert band and a piano player also.
Hmm.
And so those if you can get the rhythm section together before playing with the band, then it makes it a lot easier for them to fit in their parts.
Yeah. And please put the drummer in a place where people can hear them. Like you might put them in the very back, but what they need to be like so the band can hear because you have a lot of these kicks, like a kick on one, and then they have to at this speed they've got to jump in right on the end of one. And if they can't hear the drummer, then those kicks aren't going to be as effective.
Yeah, it's definitely a good idea for bands that are not used to that aesthetic, to get the rhythm section together and then have them play separately from the band so that the band can maybe watch your parts and figure out how they're supposed to go together.
Great. Here, let's check it out. So again, this is about a 3 minute chart. I think we have the whole one on this one. It's the most wonderful time of the year. So we so often have B flat blueses, and we also less common, but we still have F blues in the jazz band realm. But there's so few E flat blues. And if people don't know Clifford Brown, where have you been? So you need to check out Clifford Brown. And on one of his most famous albums, which is escaping me right now, Sandu is this great E flat blues. And your chart on this, I think, is what, a great 3.5. So I mean, it's not the hardest thing ever. There's a great soli, there's a great a cappella section in it, and it's an E flat blues. We were talking about chord changes and soloing as we're preparing tunes off air. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but I was wondering if we could bring that conversation, kind of resurrect it for people to listen to.
Sure.
So, so I think that people need to choose tunes with the solo section in mind. I think so many times we try to get a chart ready, and then near the end we're like, "Oh yeah, who's going to solo?" And then you've said you've heard a lot of bands where you can tell like the solo section is the weakest point.
Yeah, as we were talking about earlier, it's I've judged a number of festivals, jazz festivals or assessments, and a lot of times the band will come in just super prepared on all of the written material, and then the soloist stands up and it sounds like they don't know what they're doing, and it just brings down the whole level of the aesthetic of the performance. So I think it's important that the solo section doesn't produce a drop off in your performance level, which is why I do written out solos for just about every jazz chart at every level, even at the upper levels. I want to provide something for them to play because in my teaching experience, I realized that there's not a whole lot of high school kids, especially middle school kids, who have developed that ability to be able to look at a set of chord changes and play a solo that actually matches the chord changes. So I try to use that as an educational situation where I will give them the written out solo, but I'll also give them the chord changes, and I'll also write out the bass part, and I'll also write out the piano part, because there's very few piano players that can look at a chord change and come up with an appropriate voicing that matches the chord change. So and for providing the written out chord changes and the written out part, hopefully some player somewhere or some director will make a connection between the written notes and the chord symbol. And hopefully I can, maybe educate some people kind of indirectly that way.
I love that. Yeah, it's just have a plan. If we're talking about that solo section, have a plan. Like, okay, our warm up is going to be E flat blues, and you're going to spend 20 minutes of every rehearsal working through E flat blues. So I've actually met directors on this podcast who they warm up just on solo sections and then they get to the chart kind of sporadically. But then when you get to the solo section, the kids are comfortable with it. I've also done charts where it's an AABA tune and the bridge is like maniacal. And you're like, we really want to do this tune, but I don't have anybody who can play on the bridge in this amount of time. So it's like, okay, great. That's a drum solo, like make that one the drum solo, like have a plan for what the solo section is going to sound like. And for goodness sakes, like choose the tune with the solo section, the chord changes in mind.
Yeah, I agree.
There's my soapbox.
Ultimately, the best thing is if your kids can learn how to improvise through the course of whatever you're doing in your rehearsal. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. But I just like to make sure that there's something there as a backup, just so that your performance has a certain consistency to it from beginning to end.
Yeah, and band directors need to know there's nothing wrong with playing the written solo. Like you have to start somewhere.
And soloists also. I mean, there's no shame in playing a written solo, especially if you play it stylistically with a good sense of time. If you can do that, you've learned something about being a soloist.
And a lot of times you can use that as a bridge to improvisation. You can say, okay, now that you've learned that really well, can you change it in some way? Is there something you can do to change it a little bit as your solo? Because some kids work more with that concrete and then they can alter it a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's all good. Just have a plan. Think about what you're going to do and don't just go, oh, there's a solo section. The concert's tomorrow. What are we going to do?
Well, I'm a jazz trombonist. So I've had kids say, well, how can you just start playing in it and it just sounds like it matches? And I tell them, I already thought about the first couple of licks before I even got to the solo. So I knew what I was going to play for probably at least the first 4 bars. And then after that, I'm just relying on patterns that I learned. It's not voodoo. Everybody that's ever learned how to play is playing material that they practiced. It just doesn't come, out of the ether somewhere. And kids need to realize that, it's something that you can develop through practice. It's not just something that either you have it or you don't have it.
Yeah.
And trust me, I'm one of those people that has to work at it. I don't have that natural ability.
Awesome. Well, let's check it out. I love this chart. Here's your chart on the Clifford Brown tune, Sandu. Right. And this is coming out right at the start of Midwest. So if people are hearing this before Midwest, hopefully they see that you're there, Chris. I'm going to be there as part of the Excelsior booth as well. People can stop by for a chat if they'd like to. Chris, what booth are you with and where is that?
We are in booth number 1625, which is on one of the main drags. It's a great location. We've been there
Mhm.
for several years. So please stop by if you're at the Midwest, and please go to our clinic. I'm presenting a clinic using our tonality shifting warm-ups with Alex Kaminsky, who's the band director at Vandercook. And he's a terrific band director. He's a master. So hopefully you all can get out if you're there and attend that session. I expect it's going to be pretty mobbed just because Alex is such a rock star.
That's awesome. So before we listen to your last chart that we're going to feature here today, you've been teaching a long time. Some advice that you might have for us fellow band directors.
Well, as far as repertoire, I know that there are certain band directors that don't think it's real music unless it's part of the standard repertoire. And I'm not entirely in agreement with that, in that, of course, there is great music in the standard repertoire, but there's also great music that bands play that is not standard repertoire music. Like if you can find a good arrangement of a film score, Randall Allen Bass has has a great piece on the soundtrack to Silverado, which is great music. Um, and of course, you're going to play marches. You got to play marches. You know, John Philip Sousa, he's a national treasure. So play marches. There's a lot of them that are written by some of our band composers have done some really fine marches. And so do that. Speaking of John Philip Sousa, the way he used to program is he would pick something out of the different genres that he was trying to represent. Like he would do an orchestra transcription, which I think are great because they expose kids to music that they might not otherwise play. Um, like Festive Overture. I mean, that's a terrific transcription. And then there's there's movie soundtracks, but there's also Broadway show music. That's an integral part of American music. And I don't think people should be shying away from playing Broadway music because I think it's part of who we are as Americans. And I just think that if you're programming a band concert, play everything that bands play, not just the standard repertoire.
I love that. Great advice. Thank you. So the last piece we're going to hit is a fast swinger, grade 4, which is a trombone section feature. They get the melody, and each one of them gets to blow a little bit. It's called Attack of the Killer Trombones. How did this come about?
Well, I was trying to think of a good title for a piece, which is sometimes how they come about. You think of a great title, and then you write a piece, and you hope that it lives up to the title. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes if you pick a great title, that sells copies, even if it's not the greatest chart. But I thought, I was looking online and I saw that Gordon Goodwin had scored Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. And I thought, well, let's do a trombone feature on, except call it Attack of the Killer Trombones.
Yeah.
Now, what kid sitting in a high school band playing trombone wouldn't want to play Attack of the Killer Trombones? So I came up with a kind of a sing, sing, sing type of tune and just let it roll. And that's what came out.
I love it. We're going to check it out. Chris, if people are looking to contact you for any reason, how would they do that?
Well, they can go to our website, www.csharpmusic.net, and you can contact the info account, which is info@csharpmusic.net, or you can just contact me directly by writing to chris@csharpmusic.net. And I welcome contact from anybody, particularly if you're going to give me a commission.
Of course. Well, Chris, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate your time very much. Here's Attack of the Killer Trombones. We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.